Mental Health Monday sometimes, and we'll be discussing depression and suicide ideation, part one. But this month, we are celebrating our 1 year anniversary. And I want to thank everyone that has subscribed, along with those who left messages, comments, provided encouraging words, and support. It is always my hope and prayer that Mental Health Monday sometimes will be beneficial to those who are in search of information on the topic of mental health and even struggling trying to gain a better understanding surrounding our mental health. Most importantly, it is always my goal to help someone as I travel along so my living will not be in vain. And on that note, let's get started. Since doing Mental Health Monday sometimes, this has been one of the most challenging ever. As I look at all of these beautiful faces, former Miss USA Chelsea, Chris, Naomi Judd, funny man Robin Williams, the children, 10-year-old Seven Bridges, 10-year-old Isabella Izzy Tishner, and high school freshman Nigel Shelby, all full of life, all with bright smiles, but all with a form of depression. Although the children were not really in a place where they were diagnosed with depression, they were bullied. Every last one of them was bullied. Seven was bullied because of his physical disability where he had to wear a colostomy bag. Izzy was bullied because of her race and her physical disability as well. She suffered from autism. Then you have Nigel. Nigel was bullied because of his confusion surrounding sexual orientation. Did you know that suicide is the 8th leading cause of death among children aged 5 to 11? Childhood suicide risk factors include mental health problems, prior suicidal behavior, trauma, peer pressure, school, or even family-related problems. Data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows that at least 3,600 children under the age of 13 has died by suicide in the last 2 decades. We need to do something about this. Just as a matter of reference, not only have I taken on the subject of mental health in America and specifically within the African American community, I've also taken on the task of living healthy, how and what we eat. And what I found most interesting as it regarding depression is some of it has to do with food. Now, some of the causes of depression are life events, childhood physical abuse, sexual abuse, bereavement or death, neglect, mental abuse, etc., personality issues, changes in personality or in one's social environment, alcoholism. Alcohol can be a depressant, which slows down some region of the brain. Bullying. Yes, we just talked about that with the children. Bullying are actions of singling out and causing harm on vulnerable individuals. Medical. Depression may be the result of health care. Doesn't that sound crazy? Health care. can cause you to have mental challenges. Maybe the result of such things as medication that will induce depression. Other substances, drugs can cause depression, whether intoxication, withdrawal, or from chronic use. Illnesses, infectious diseases, nutritional deficiencies, physiological problems, neurological conditions. But more importantly, in order to combat some of the things that we deal with from a mental health perspective, it starts from the physical. It starts from what we put in our mouth. Not all of it, but that's a place that we can look as it relates to treating our mental health with more of a level of importance than we typically do with our physical health. And if we look at it from a holistic perspective, the whole person, the mind, the body, the soul, the spirit, it's all connected. And it all starts with what we put in our mouth. So what we eat matters for every aspect of our health, but especially our mental health. Several recent research analyses looking at multiple studies support that there is a link between what one eats and our risk of depression. Specifically, one analysis concluded a dietary pattern characterized by a high intake of fruit, vegetables, whole grains, fish, olive oil, low-fat dairy and antioxidants, and low intakes of animal foods was apparently associated with a depressed or a decreased risk of depression. A dietary pattern characterized by a high consumption of red and or processed meat, refined grains, sweets, high-fat dairy products, butter, potatoes, and high-fat gravy and low intakes of fruit and vegetables is associated with an increased risk of depression. And that source is Harvard Health Publishing or the Harvard Medical School. Let's move on to more about what depression is. What is depression? After listening to a podcast by Dr. Tama Bryant, PhD, Director of the Culture and Trauma Research Lab at the Graduate School of Education and Psychology at Pepperdine, also incoming 2023 President of the American Psychological Association, which happens to be the creators of the DSM-5 manual that psychologists and psychiatrists use in assessing their patients. What is depression? Depression is a disease or illness of the mind. Clinical, chronic, or major depression is deeper and more severe than sadness. Depression lasts for at least 2 weeks. If it lasts over a weekend, it is not depression. It prevents you from functioning in life. It's intense sadness, tearfulness, emptiness, hopelessness. Irritability can be a sign due to despair and hopelessness. It may show up as anger because of the level of frustration. It can prevent you from enjoying those things that used to give you pleasure. It's not a personal rejection. It's not having the capacity to feel enjoyment. Insomnia is a sign. Feels like a weight holding you down in the bed. Depression takes your energy. May experience fatigue. Depression may cause overeating or not eating at all. Depression can cause people to be slower in their reactions and the way they used to do things. There can be trouble thinking and concentrating. Some depression shows up in the body. Headaches, body aches, upset stomach, backaches. Sometimes the body is telling the story of all that's being held within. In depression, isolation can make you feel like you're all alone. Lateness does not demonstrate a lack of care with people who have depression. They had to fight their way to get there. Depression does not mean you're weak or bad. You have an illness. Depression. Let's talk. In order to get a better understanding of how depression affects someone in real life, the best way to do that is to solicit information from people who may have experienced depression. And so, leading up to this, we'll be listening to two young people that I solicited to help me with this presentation in order for us to get a better understanding of how things came about. And I asked them a series of questions. In this particular presentation, we're going to go through the 5 questions that are on the screen. And so, without further ado, the next speaking voice you will hear will be from our guest that I appreciate so very, very much. All right, let's move on.
Hi, my name is Rashid Allen. I am a full-time stylist, a part-time life coach who specializes in self-love and mindfulness coaching. I am the mother of one amazing daughter who's 14, and I am one of 6 total siblings. My oldest sister being deceased, and so I am now the only girl currently of 4 other brothers. So imagine that family dynamic.
My name is Dalen Jeffries. I am an entrepreneur, and I grew up in a 2-parent household with an older sibling.
Do I or have I struggled with depression? Yes. I was clinically diagnosed in 2018. There were many factors that aided in that. So definitely grief, so loss of multiple relatives. I transitioned from a stable job to the land of uncertainty job. So I went from being at a school system and then transitioning into being a full-time entrepreneur, along with just other factors of not dealing with past traumas, past breakups. So a bunch of factors kind of aided into how I got to this point of being depressed and being diagnosed with depression.
Struggle with depression. I've never been clinically diagnosed with it, but I have had suffered from depressed moments. I have been anxious at times, so I do think that I have suffered from depression before. I'm not exactly sure all the way what caused it, because again, I've never been clinically diagnosed with depression. But I have noticed that I've suffered from, again, depressed moments and anxious moments after the loss of family members, due to relationship issues, isolation, a number of different things that happen in everybody's life that have kind of taken me to a really low place before.
Have I sought professional help, and what led me to do so? Yes, I did seek professional help. I did not seek it right away upon the diagnosis. It took me maybe a year or so to seek professional help, more so because when you grow up in like family dynamics, right? Therapy wasn't a thing. It was, but it wasn't. Telling people about your life, right? Your issues was not a thing. And so it took me a while. At one point, I was juggling 3 therapists because in my mind, I thought that one person couldn't handle, right, all that I had endured. And so I was somehow juggling 3. Still can't tell you how that happened. But eventually I found one person that was perfect for me, and she is currently still my person. What led me to do so, I was in the process of actual suicide attempt. I was mid-stride and about to take myself and my daughter away from here. And so at that point is when I I realized I needed to really buckle down on my mental health for sure. I don't believe, or I've been asked, was it caused by genetics or, hormonal imbalances? I can't really say yes to genetics because I don't think that I knew what it looked like back then, right? Growing up in a family where children were seen and not heard was the commonality for me. And so I didn't know what it looked like, right? I didn't even know what it felt like because we were taught to, keep going, keep moving, keep pushing, you got it. So it was never a time where I was able to kind of sit with my thoughts per se, or even how to process what that even looked like. So I can't say that it was tied to genetics, even to hormonal imbalances. I've always been a child who fluctuated between emotions, but I never even took that into consideration for hormonal imbalance, right? But the moment that I knew that I was in crisis, like I knew leading up to the depression, the diagnosis, and all of that, that something wasn't right. But again, being told that you progress forward, keep pushing, keep praying, you'll be fine. Everybody goes through something. Okay, cool. Until it got to the point where I was full throttle into a suicidal attempt, and I realized, like, yes, you might need to really go and see somebody and really start to deal with yourself.
I've been clinically diagnosed, so I have never gone to the doctor and said that I felt depressed. I have had therapy before, though. After the loss of my father, that was one of the things that I really made a point to kind of do. I think that my father suffered from some mental health issues that went undiagnosed for a long time. And the loss of him kind of pushed me into a place where I was just kind of unsure about everything. So I was regularly going to therapy and just kind of trying to get my mental health more intact after the loss of my father.
Did I participate in talk therapy or medication maintenance? More so talk therapy. I had experienced my twin brother briefly going through some form of therapy and being on meds. And I believe I partially suppressed some of the things that I went through as a child, but that definitely weighed heavy on my take on if I wanted to take meds or if I wanted to really go through this process of healing myself holistically. When I say holistically, meaning, hey, let's talk it out. Let's learn how to do the things that I was not taught as a child, like how to process my thoughts, how to, be in the moment, but not stay in the moment, right? Find some resolve. You don't have to solve it all at one time, then come back. So talk therapy weighed more heavier for me than medication maintenance. And also, what aided in that thought process too was me working at a school system and me specifically working with diverse learners or children who struggled with behavior problems or, were born, delayed or whatever the case may be. I looked at how they were on meds. So I was never for it, but neither was I never against it, because there were some instances where I said, hey, maybe I do need to do this, because it became very hard for me of having to go through all of these thoughts, right? But what I got from not wanting to be on meds is that I didn't want to suppress them either. I wanted to really fully understand how I had gotten to the place of depression, and then how to properly walk through the processes to not be in this position again. So that weighed heavier on me of, hey, let's just talk it out, right? Let me just really figure out how I really got here, and not so much of getting rid of my thought processes. I wanted to kind of be in them so that I could really truly heal and not just coat it, so to speak. I didn't want to have a coating on top of that. I am still in the process that I am still learning some things of my past. I still am screaming no meds. I've been doing well thus far, and so I feel like I'm doing the work, right? I legit am doing the work. Is it hard? Absolutely. It is very, very hard and tedious to do this because of the emotional imbalances from not having emotions, or them being suppressed as a child, right? Being told that I cry too much, and so having to relearn how to just express myself has been really, really hard. But it's doable, and like I said, I've been doing the work. I'm probably at my best that I've been in a very long time, and so it seems to be working. Talk therapy just seems to be working for me.
Did you participate in talk therapy or medication maintenance? And can you describe the outcome, or are you still in the process? So a lot of the therapy that I've had was talk therapy. I have never, again, been clinically diagnosed with depression. I've never been medicated for the feelings or for depression before, but I have participated in talk therapy, and I was going weekly for about 6 months. I do think that it helped a lot. I think that it was able to kind of help me unbottle a lot of the things that I had been kind of pushing deep down. It helped me, again, unbottle a lot of things that I didn't even know that I was still carrying with me and kind of affecting me on my day to day. So the talk therapy was a really, really, really big help for me. Just kind of understanding how my brain works, and how it can try to play tricks on you sometimes. So talk therapy was a really, really big thing for me, and I think I encourage most people to take advantage of it at least once. And from there, you can kind of like make your decisions on if there's something that you think you should do regularly. But I think talk therapy is something that I think everybody should take advantage of at least once in their life.
Did I discuss my issues with the trusted friend? Yes, I discussed it with my friend circle. That consisted of 5 women. Here's here's my delay. I believe that I am still struggling with that part because I lost friends because of it. It's just a different space. I've grown to accept partially that some people just don't fully understand. And me being the person who was depended on to be the inspiration to help other people in pretty much every capacity, right? I then found myself in a position where I needed help. And at the time of me telling these said friends, they didn't know how to handle that. And for me, in the moment, I thought that they didn't care, that they only wanted what they wanted. Eventually, that did come out into fruition. But in that moment, it was the hardest thing for me to tell people, especially my friends, because I was always the one that seemed put together, right? And having to share something that intimate made me so vulnerable. And in my mind, right, vulnerability then was a weakness and not a strength. And I lived a lot of my life, even though I appeared to be the socialite, I lived a very isolated life, very quiet, very reserved, and I feel like that was kind of part of the depression that I didn't pick up on right away. I just felt like I was doing 50,000 other things, and I just needed to kind of be alone because I was always in front of people, right? Working with children, working with staff, then went to doing hair, so I was always on. And for me, being isolated felt like I should have just been off. And then I had the friends who like understood it, and even if they don't understand it, they sought knowledge behind it to have a better understanding, to help me, help myself in the process. So, yeah, I guess I did trust them when I finally was able to tell them, and some were helpful and some were not. Um, and that's where I stand with that. But I still struggle sometimes with the hurt of having friends who I thought would have tried a little bit more, tried a little bit harder to understand what I was per se dealing with. Yeah. So that still kind of, I still toggle a little bit with that thought process with trusting people with my issues.
Did you discuss your issue with a trusted friend and were they helpful? So that's the thing about depression, or about me with depression. I think I was already an isolated person. I keep a lot of things to myself, and don't like to quote unquote burden my friends and family members with things that I feel are just a self problem. So there were moments where I would talk to my friends, and I would say that those were some of my lowest moments. But most times I did not kind of go to anybody, and I think that's kind of what made the depression kind of really boil over, is that I was kind of like, pushing it deep down, and I was just kind of letting it build up. But in those moments when I did talk to trusted friends, they were helpful, just kind of being that listening ear. But what I noticed is that there wasn't a whole lot they could do for me in the moment. It was great because they would always kind of reaffirm me and kind of let me know that I was loved, and that I was kind of capable of the things that my mind would kind of tell me that I wasn't. But again, depression is such a ugly beast that even in those moments, it doesn't always help. And I found myself still kind of feeling low after those conversations. Because again, it just wasn't doing what I was like kind of looking for. You kind of were looking for answers on why you were feeling this way, and what was wrong with you. And sometimes your friends just aren't able to kind of understand how you got to that place, and so sometimes they're not able to kind of help pull you out. But I am grateful for the friends that do kind of like lend that listening ear, because that's kind of what therapy is, right? Just kind of somebody listening to you, allowing you to kind of get those feelings out, and then kind of reaffirming you.
First, I'd like to thank my guests, Rashi and Delon, for their willingness and bravery to have this much needed discussion. Both of these young people I've been knowing for quite some time, and although within recent history I've not seen them up close and personal, I therefore consider it an honor that they respect me enough to share their story, which will hopefully help others to come forward. In light of recent events concerning others that have struggled with depression, it is also appropriate that we talk about this illness in a way that brings about understanding, hopefulness, awareness, compassion, and much needed change within our families, intimate circles, and especially our places of worship, where we see many signs and symptoms that are displayed on a regular basis, but we sometimes continue to hide it by saying things like the person may be in the spirit, or even hide more severe mental illness under the guise of covering one another. It is lastly my hope that those in leadership will assist in pulling the covers off of what's been hidden for many generations by soliciting the help of those who can create a safe and healing place for those who are among them. In an effort to demonstrate how serious this is, here are some statistics that should cause us all to pause and digest the severity of mental illness. 13.4% of the U.S. population, or nearly 46 million people, identify themselves as Black or African American, and another 2.7 identified as multiracial. More than 1 in 5 Black and African American people in the U.S. lived in poverty as of 2018. Women, I'll say that again, women are the heads of household in roughly 30% of Black and African American homes compared to 9% of white homes. Keep in mind these things that are in bold. They're really critical. Historical adversity, which includes slavery, sharecropping, and race-based exclusion from health, educational, social, and economic resources, translates into socioeconomic disparities experienced by Black and African American people today. Socioeconomic status, in turn, is linked to mental health. People who are impoverished, homeless, incarcerated, or have substance use problems are at a higher risk for poor mental health. Black and African American people living below poverty are twice as likely to report serious psychological distress than those living over 2% the poverty level. Adult Blacks and African Americans are more likely to have feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and worthlessness than adult whites. Oh yes, there are plenty more statistics. Black and African Americans hold beliefs related to stigma, psychological openness, and help seeking, which in turn affects their coping behaviors. Black and African American men are particularly concerned about stigma. Participants appeared apprehensive about seeking professional help for mental health issues, which is consistent with previous research. Black and African American people are more often diagnosed with schizophrenia and less often diagnosed with mood disorders compared to white people with the same symptoms. Additionally, they are offered medication or therapy at a lower rate or lower rates than the general population. Black and African American people are overrepresented in our jails and prisons. Black and African American people make up 13% of the general U.S. population, but nearly 40% of the prison population. Oh yes, there's more. Because less than 2% of the American Psychological Association members are Black or African American, some may worry that mental health care practitioners are not culturally competent to treat their specific issues. Stigma and judgment prevent Black and African American people from seeking treatment for their mental illness. Research indicates that Blacks and African Americans believe that mild depression or anxiety would be considered crazy in their social circles. Furthermore, many believe that discussions about mental illness would not be appropriate even among family. Some of our guests mentioned a lot of these things that have been highlighted or in bold. The umbrella of depression encompasses major depressive disorder and its related mood disorders, including bipolar disorder, postpartum depression, post-traumatic stress syndrome, anxiety disorder, and suicide. As it relates to the statistics, it is important to highlight the various correlations of the guest and the statistics. The major markers to highlight is gender, socioeconomic status, race, historical and social references, environmental dynamics, and family structure. Both participants have had experiences in talk therapy or psychotherapy. Yet, One has not been clinically diagnosed. The most astonishing information revealed is the perception and experiences as it relates to sharing their information with close friends. Depression. Two forms of depression here. MDD, major depressive disorder, which causes serious persistent feelings or sadness and other symptoms that make functioning or enjoying life very difficult. PDD, or persistent depressive disorder, is a milder form of MDD, but more chronic and lasting. This concludes our part 1 session on depression and suicide ideation. However, the main thing that we need to keep in mind is that depression is an illness. It is not a reason to be ashamed. It is not a reason to feel that you're worthless, hopeless, or you're a bad person. It's an illness. And so the main thing that we need to do as a community overall is to stop the stigma. Let's get educated. And of course, if you are in crisis or you need to speak with someone because you're feeling exceptionally low, please don't hesitate. Please don't hesitate to contact the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, which is available 24 hours a day in English and Spanish. And that number is 1-800-273-8255. Again, that's 1-800-273-8255. I'll see you next week. This concludes Mental Health Monday sometime.